Autism and Mental Health test recording by Richard Woods, London South Bank University PhD student. This is a test recording for a short 10-minute talk that's due to happen on the 31st of March 2022. So, a bit about me and my perspective. I am autistic, and my agenda is for at least inclusive, good quality, scientific, method-based research and practice. And I am currently studying a PhD at London South Bank University. Um, yeah, all human beings have spiky profiles, which are transient across lifetime and different situations, and this is acknowledged in one of the main diagnostic manuals anyway. Autistic persons, we are known to have our spiky profiles tend to be more pronounced than non-autistic persons, and most disorders that are kind of used in clinical practice are associated with trauma and/or aversive childhood experiences. And for autistic persons, about 70% of us will have at least one co-occurring difficulty, and at least 40% of us will have at least two. And most of these kind of co-occurring difficulties will be kind of presented in autistic people due to how we are often poorly treated by non-autistic society. So what this means in practice is you're often not just dealing with autism, you are dealing with the co-occurring conditions and autism, and the literature tells us that autism and co-occurring conditions often simultaneously interact with each other, and this means that things like anxiety can present slightly differently in autistic people compared to non-autistic persons, and that, for example, anxiety can have different causal mechanisms in autistic persons. It can also be quite difficult to differentiate features between autism and various co-occurring conditions. So, yeah, autistic persons, as I said previously, we tend to be treated quite poorly by society, and so a lot of us tend to have quite a lot amount of trauma. There is some research suggesting that autistic persons accrue PTSD features, and so kind of trauma in autistic persons is quite a hot topic, at least within the autistic community. Again, like trauma-based kind of disorders often overlap autism, and it can be difficult to diagnose autistic persons in some cases. It can lead to kind of missed diagnoses or kind of misdiagnoses. So at the bottom of the screen is just a screenshot of a tweet I did on this topic, and it's had, for myself, it's had a substantial amount of interest on it. It's also quite an interesting discussions on the topic as well. So about myself and my own struggles, I'm not going to kind of list them all, but these are just an example of 9 areas that I kind of struggle with my own kind of spiky profile. So I have really bad executive functioning, so that's like decision making and kind of planning and sticking to plans. To my communication style can be quite eclectic, and I give loads of information and go off on tangent loads. So yeah, I can also, for me, I kind of like perpetually conflict between my kind of like rational side of me and my kind of impulsive, emotional side of me. And I have a very strong sense of right or wrong, which tends to be a good thing, but I can be easily triggered due to it. So a bit on positive aspects, I am quite easily amused. I'm quite highly empathetic. I have a quite highly intelligent, and I am quite highly reflective. I like making puns, as you can probably tell by the puns at the top of the slides. I have a good sense of self-awareness, and I have a strong passion for doing the right thing. So, yeah. A bit more moving on to how to work with autistic people generally. You probably read in the literature that we are full of deficits, and our deficits need to be kind of fixed, and our autism needs to be cured. I would point out that despite this, autistic people are fully human, and and that applies even to when we have like substantial difficulties. So I'm especially referring to those who would be diagnosed with kind of low functioning autism or kind of level 3 support needs under the DSM-5. As a kind of category, as a kind of group of people, as a demographic, as a population, we are highly diverse. I don't tend to like using the term spectrum. I tend to use kind of continuum or manifold to describe us. But attempts to divide autism have all failed essentially. There's no successful way to do that. So yeah, it's worth pointing out that when a person's autistic, it's an intrinsic part of who we are. You cannot separate our autistic lived experience away from who we are. The only way to do that is to kill us, essentially. Um, that's obviously not what people want to do. So yeah, as I said earlier, like due to how poorly treated we are by society, one could argue that we're all kind of complex and perplexing presentations, due to how autistic people often tend to struggle to kind of deal with us, which I'll kind of get onto. I tend to advocate kind of a co-regulating transactional approach, so focusing on how I interact with the environment, how the environment kind of affects me. So yeah, it kind of means like treating me as any other person, like listen to me, work on my strengths and weaknesses, and in order to kind of take into account the kind of the spiky profile aspect of me and other autistic people, like you need to take a genuine person-centered approach, which takes me on to the next point. But at the same time, you have to account for the autism because the autism colours everything. So from a lived experience perspective, I and most other autistic persons will tend to we tend to experience the world more intensely than non-autistic people. And if we do something, or if we do an action, it's usually for a good reason or a rational reason. But it might look weird from other people's perspectives. But the issue is kind of digging down beneath that and working out what's actually causing us to do something. And that can be difficult not only from non-autistic person's perspective, but also from our own. So, for example, if we have issues understanding our own kind of internal kind of bodily states with interoception issues, or, for example, issues understanding our emotions, that's also going to be a bit of an issue. As I said, like, if you take a transactional stress-based approach, if autistic persons are anxious and stressed, is usually either because of the situation we're presently in and or because of previous adverse experiences. So when working with autistic people, there's some general kind of ground rules like we're working with us, which is generally always consider sensory differences, always consider kind of camouflaging or masking, and people should take a low arousal approach. That is like that is not no arousal. So actually do give us stuff we're interested in. And also, if you're going to work with us and help us build our routines up and activities, like they should be done on our terms. Instead, we are fully human, and we will tend to respond quite well with stuff we're passionate about. So, a brief example about me, and I'm to kind of self-regulate, so including stimming. So I tend to play loads of my kind of long belt, which you obviously can't see because it's a video recording of some slides. But yeah, I tend to communicate in certain kind of ways. So when I'm interacting kind of face-to-face or kind of video calls, I will often kind of tilt my head to one side to focus on actually what's being said more than kind of the visual information that's going to be conveyed by people. It's just because it's in that situation it's easier for me to process the information better, to process one sensory kind of input at a time. Yeah, and like, do not expect me to care about or follow all non-autistic social norms. There's plenty of them I really disagree with. A classic one at the moment is like my uni expects me to do the Gantt chart, and to me there's a waste of time to use my kind of like executive function issues. Yeah, so yeah, engage with subjects I'm interested and passionate about. Like try to negotiate me on some things if possible. Like obviously puns, I'm a big fan of puns. And yeah, treat me as a human being and take my perspective seriously. I've been hurt quite a few times or been a bit upset with people who haven't actually bothered to actually consider my viewpoint, despite the fact that I have been expressing it quite vehemently and quite rigorously and ardently. If I have a viewpoint, it's generally for a very good reason. I have put a lot of thought into it. So some concluding comments. Yeah, so this is a quote from the 2015 England Autism Strategy. So this is particularly important for some people with autism, including those with Asperger's syndrome, who may face very significant challenges in their everyday lives, despite having average or above average IQ. So what this is basically to say is that even people who could be described as having high functioning autism, like myself, we can often have difficulties, quite severe difficulties, in our everyday lives. it's also kind of point out that that all autistic people are similar to each other in some aspects. Um, yeah, this is a generic question of trying to get people to reflect on how they treat autistic people. So, like, how do you feel about autistic persons creating a disorder that pathologizes your non-compliance in creating an autism-friendly world and lack of empathy towards us? And the last bit is just the kind of image with the kind of tweet I showed earlier. It's just that question. It's like, is it possible for a autistic person to recover from trauma? If so, what does it look like? And a link to the tweet if you wanted to kind of have a look through the comments and stuff. But please be respectful of what's in there, because people have to talk about quite sensitive stuff in some aspects. But it's actually a very fascinating discussion. So yeah, these are my contact details. So my email address, Twitter handle, and a link to my ResearchGate, which has virtually all my research publications on. And I'm going to move on to a couple of slides for my references, which I'm not going to linger on loads, because you can pause it. And that's it, so thank you for your time.